express our gratitude to our God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for He has bestowed us abundant mercies. So, due to those, we are able to attend this monthly lecture. Peace and salutation we ask for our Prophet Muhammad, S.A. for his family, for his companions, and all of his ummah until Judgment Day. Today, I would like to talk about the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. Yusuf, or also known as Joseph, was the beloved son of Prophet Yaqub, which he was also called Jacob, who also had 11 other sons. Binyamin, who was the youngest, was from the same mother as Yusuf, while the rest were older half-brothers. Yusuf, still a young boy, awoke one glorious morning delighted by a pleasant dream he had. He ran to his father in excitement and said, "Oh, my father, indeed I have seen 11 stars and the sun and the moon. I saw them prostrating to me." Yaqub was overjoyed in his realization that his dear son was indeed chosen by Allah to be bestowed with prophethood. However, Yaqub was concerned about his older sons' possible reaction to this narration. For even though he treated them the same, they harbored jealousy towards Yusuf. He therefore warned Yusuf against relating his dream to his brothers, lest they plot for his downfall. With the passage of time, the malice in the hearts of Yusuf's brothers kept going. They envied Yusuf because they felt he was special and they were not. Unable to handle their emotions, they devised a plan to get rid of Yusuf by throwing him into a well. So one day they approached their father and suggested that he send Yusuf to come with them with an outing. A very reluctant Yaqub said, "Indeed, it saddens me that you should take him, and I fear that a wolf would eat him while you are unaware." But the brothers insisted that they would take extreme care of him and that Yusuf would enjoy himself. The next day, Yusuf sent off with his brothers. They traveled far in pursuit of a well deep enough to throw their brother in. When they finally reached the well, on the pretext of drinking water, they led him to it, grabbed him, and removed his shirt. Yusuf began struggling and pleaded with them to let go. The brothers eventually outpowered Yusuf and threw him down the well and rushed back home. The brothers ran to their father, crying Yusuf's shirt that was smeared with sheep's blood. They cried, "Oh, our father, indeed we went racing with each other and left Yusuf with our possessions, and a wolf ate him." Yaqub was suspicious of their story. He, in his heart, believed his son was still alive and that the brothers were likely enticed by Shaitan, or Satan, to do evil. He marked that the wolf was indeed merciful to have eaten his son up without tearing his shirt. He bore the bereavement with patience and prayed for his son's safe return. Meanwhile, Yusuf managed to cling onto a stone ledge. He prayed fervently to Allah to grant him salvation. Soon a caravan bound to Egypt stopped at this well to fetch water. The water drawer hauled up his bucket and was shocked to see his handsome boy clinging onto the rope. The caravan people immediately shackled Yusuf and took him along to Egypt. Here he was unshunt and sold as a slave to the highest bidder, who happened to be the treasurer, Al-Aziz. Yusuf's new master, who had no children, was completely taken with Yusuf. He told his wife to take good care of Yusuf, and they could either use him as a slave or take him for a son. Yusuf not only grew up to be a handsome young man, but also blessed with exceptional knowledge and wisdom by Allah. His honesty won the heart of Al-Aziz, who placed Yusuf in charge of his household. During this period, Yusuf was confronted with his second trial. Zuleika, Al-Aziz's wife, who watched Yusuf day after day, began to feel passionately about him. Her obsession heightened to a degree where she was desperate to fulfill her desire. One day, when her husband was away from home, she closed the doors and invited Yusuf to her. Yusuf, fearing Allah, he replied, "I seek refuge in Allah. Indeed, he is my master, who has made good my residence. Indeed, wrongdoers will not succeed." He turned away towards run towards the door to escape. Zuleika chased after him in desperation and grabbed his shirt from the back, which caused his shirt to rip. The door opened and Al-Aziz entered. Ashamed, she ran to him and cried, "What's the recompense of one who intended evil for your wife, but that be imprisoned or a painful punishment?" Yusuf was baffled. He continued to deny his mistress's claim, saying, "It was she who sought to seduce me." Al-Aziz was a fair man. He was confused and unsure of whom to believe, so he consulted his wife's cousin for advice. If his shirt is torn from the front, then she has told the truth and he is of the liars, advised the cousin. Thus, Yusuf's innocence was proven. Al-Aziz apologized for his wife's indecency and swore Yusuf to secrecy. Nevertheless, the story of Zuleika's pursuit spread. Other women began ridiculing her character. Distressed, Zuleika planned to prove that to them her helpless reaction to Yusuf's extraordinary handsomeness. Hence, she invited these women to a banquet at her residence one day. There she served them fruit along with knives. When the women were happily chatting away while slicing fruits, Zuleika summoned Yusuf. The women looked up at him, astonished at such angelic beauty. They cut their hands while not even realizing they had. Zuleika seized the moment to announce that this was the man for whom she was blamed. She then warned Yusuf that if he denied her again, he would be imprisoned, to which Yusuf replied, "My lord, prison is more to my liking than that to which they invite me." That night, Zuleika convinced my husband, that the only way to safeguard her honor was to prestige was to imprison Yusuf. Thus, Yusuf was thrown into jail. During Yusuf's time in jail, he was bestowed with the ability to interpret dreams. Two of Yusuf's cellmates memorized his pity sought him to have their dreams explained. One dreamt that he was serving the king wine and the other were carrying bread on his head, which two birds were eating up. Yusuf initially called them to Allah, then interpreted, "O two companions of prison, as for one of you, he will give drink to his master of wine, but as for the other, he will be crucified and the birds will eat from his head. The matter has been decreed about which you both acquire." As he said to one whom he knew would go free, "Mention me before your master." But Shaitan made him forget the mention to his master, and Yaqub remained in prison for several years. One day the king of Egypt had an old dream. He summoned his men and said, "Indeed, I have seen 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 lean, and 7 green spikes of grain and others dry. O eminent ones, explain to me my vision, if you should interpret visions." The cupbearer, who immediately remembered his companion in prison, informed the king of Yusuf and his impeccable dream interpretation. The king sent off his cupbearer to prison to meet with Yusuf and inquire about peculiar dream. Yusuf were enjoyed at his sight of companion and knew that it was indeed the plan of Allah. He narrated to him, "You will plant for 7 years consecutively, and what you harvest leave in its spikes, except a little from which you will eat. Then come after that 7 difficult years, which they consume what they advanced for them, except a little from which you will store. Then will come after that a year in which the people will be given rain and which they press." Amazed, the king ordered Yusuf to be presented before him. Yusuf, however, refused to leave the prison until his innocence were proved. The king thus summoned the women relating to Yusuf's incident. The women who had their hands cut spoke to Yusuf's innocence before the king. Said the king to the women, "What was your condition when you sought to seduce Joseph?" They said, "Perfect is Allah. We know about him no evil." The wife of Al-Aziz said, "Now the truth has become evident. It was I who sought to seduce him, and indeed He is of the truthful. Thus, Yusuf's innocence were proven, released from prison. Yusuf stood before the king to thank him for his generosity. The king, who was greatly impressed by Yusuf's honest mannerism and his pleasant personality, led him to being appointed as the storekeeper over the storehouses across his land. Yusuf harvested and stored crops during the 7 years of fertility. Then approached the year of famine that also reached the household of Jacob in Canaan. Jacob sent all his sons except Benjamin to Egypt to purchase provisions. Yusuf immediately recognized his brothers and provided for them, but kept his identity disguised. He casually inquired about their family. The brothers informed the storekeeper of their house back in Canaan and their father and brother back home. Yusuf informed them to bring the younger brother along next time, or they shall receive no further provisions. He also placed the money they had with the supplies and as an incentive to return. The brothers returned home and said, "Oh, our father, measure has been denied to us. So send with us our brother, we will be given measure. And indeed, we will be his guardians." Jacob was enraged. How could he trust them with they had failed him terribly with Yusuf before? And sometime, however, their needs pressed Jacob to send Benjamin with them for more provisions. They took them their solemn oath to safeguard him. But when they reached Egypt, Yusuf drew Benjamin aside and whispered to his ear, "Indeed, I am your brother. So do not despair over what they used to do to me." The following day, Yusuf filled his brother's bag with grain. He then secretly planted the king's golden bowl in Benjamin's bag. On departing, the brothers were stopped by the king's soldier who were looking for the king's missing cup. The bags of the brothers were searched, and the missing cup was retrieved from the bag and the youngest brother Benjamin. The soldiers cried, "O caravan, indeed you are thieves." The brothers were shocked. The brothers immediately remembered their sick father back home, and their vow to safeguard Benjamin at all costs. They begged the soldier to release their younger brother and take one of them instead, but the soldiers refused. The eldest among the brothers said, "I will never leave this land until my father permits, or me or Allah decides for me." So the rest of the brothers left Egypt, leaving the eldest behind. When Jacob learned of his youngest son's predicament, he wept and wept until he became blind. He restored to players to comfort, and he knew that only Allah could ease his pain. Soon he instructed his sons to return to the king's land and inquire about their brother. Their sons returned to Egypt once again. They met with Yusuf and pleaded that tragedy had befallen them. Yusuf then spoke to them in native language. "Do you know what you did with Yusuf and his brother when you were ignorant?" It didn't take long for the brothers to realize that this was indeed their long-lost brother and began to tremble in fear. But Yusuf comforted, saying, "No reproach on you this day. May Allah forgive you." Then he said, "Take this shirt, my shirt, and cast over the face of my father. His eyesight will return." As instructed, the brothers cast Yusuf's shirt over the father's face, and Allah miraculously restored his eyesight. They beseeched their father to seek Allah's forgiveness for them. Together, they all set off to Egypt, where Yusuf warmly welcomed them. Yusuf reigned, "My father, this is the explanation of my vision before. My Lord has made it to reality. He was certainly good to me when he took out of the prison and brought you here from Bedouin life after Satan had induced between me and my brothers. Indeed, my Lord is subtle with what he wills. Indeed, it is he who is knowing the wise." Thus Allah reunited father and son. Lesson. Prophet Yusuf from his dream knew that he was destined for greatness, but it seemed at every turn of his life he he was met with difficulties and adversity. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold as slave, and unjustly imprisoned. Yusuf could have chosen to be bitter and question Allah by saying, I thought you had ordained for me greatness. He could have easily complained and asked, why do these things keep happening to me? But he knew better. He knew Allah had a plan for him and he had to just keep faith. Yusuf knew by just focusing on being the best he could, treating people right and with respect, doing more than what was requested, that Allah would take care of him. There was certainly in the stories a lesson for those of understanding. Never was the Quran a narration invented, but a confirmation of what was before it and detailed explanation of all things, guidance and mercy for a people who believe. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.